So for just touches of humour there, going on to number 4, I don't think there's anything humorous about this at all. It's a very serious subject matter. It's titled Virgo Black Hole. And actually this one is in 2 parts. The first part of it is Virgo Black Hole, and the second part of it is what lies, we believe, on the other side of that, which is called Bertie's Empty Quarter, which is what's known as a supervoid, I believe. Is that correct? And so this really is just, there's got one theme to it, and that's being sucked into a black hole with that irresistible gravitational force which will tear you apart and do all sorts of things which are no fun at all.
Can you remember what our phrase was for this?
So for this one, yes, I think the all-encompassing power of the anima was this one. So can you just actually describe what anima is and how we came up with this?
Well, the anima is the feminine aspect of the male, isn't it?
Yes.
So like the animus is
in the philosophy of perhaps Freud
or Jung.
And Jung. Okay.
Jungian, Freudian.
Right.
And Virgo, of course, is the Virgin, or the Earth Mother in the sort of ecliptic zodiac as was, and it's all about the power of the feminine in nature. Really, let's not say in the male. It's the feminine in nature, and we all know, of course, that the feminine is much more powerful force in a certain way. They bring forth the new generation, etc. Not without the animus help, but that's the feminine, is the bringing forth of the new generation. But this was written actually at the time, just after the first photograph appeared of a black hole. Of course, Stephen Hawking and many others, Einstein, I believe, even posited that a black hole was a possibility. But it was a few months or a month or so after this was actually photographed by an American lady astrophysicist, photographed in the sense that the data was made into a photograph. It's not like get out the snapshot and there's a black hole, but she translated the data into a photograph of a black hole the first time ever. And they're everywhere in the universe, but that's why I chose the Virgo black hole, because that was the first one to be imaged.
Right, okay.
Imaged, not photographed.
Yes. So big historical significance.
And
that discovery, yes?
Not far away from Virgo, although not actually in the ecliptic, is a constellation called Bertie's. And in the direction of the constellation of Bertie's, the herdsman, is a massive hole in the universe. Almost nothing exists in this hole. If you go out into the space around us in the planetary system we live in, there are actually quite a lot of particles in the space. It's not empty like people think. But you go to the space in the Bertie's supermassive void, it can go down to sort of 10 particles every square kilometre. That's a very small amount of matter.
Yeah.
So it's from this
almost total vacuum, almost complete and utter vacuum.
Almost complete and utter vacuum. So you go from this wrecking, destroying, twisting and warping time and space object in Virgo to this utter nothingness. There's almost nothing in there for thousands of millions of light years.
And again, musically, I think you captured that brilliantly from the first half of this piece, the black hole experience of being sucked into it, and then ending up on the other side, as it were, in a sense, in something which is practical nothingness.
May I ask you a question as the viola?
Yes.
The beginning of this piece, this Virgo, it has these long notes pressed very hard down on the string, like a grinding, sort of metal grinding sound.
Yes.
And listening to your performance while I was sort of mixing it in with the orchestra, it sounded as if you went a bit warped as well playing it. Did it have this effect on your mind? Like
from a mental point of view, yes, I think so, yes. The visceral power. Yeah. I remember thinking of those 2 words actually almost immediately after I'd listened to your demo that maybe you first sent to me with a sound file.
So
but then when I played it myself, visceral power, and that's, mentally speaking, identified with presumably what I thought must be this huge gravitational force involved in the movement from the very beginning, and in musical terms as well. Absolutely, and that was Mark's Sul Ponticello, which is on the bridge, and I did this right on the bridge, at a very extreme Sul Ponticello, with as much downward pressure as I could. So in a sense, breaking a lot of the rules of string playing, where the general idea for most of classical music is to make the string vibrate so much that it doesn't need to be pressed or pulled anymore.
Yeah.
But this was a process of sound distortion, which directly reflected the distortion involved in the physics that's involved with this movement. And I think there were 11 of these open C string growls, grinds at the beginning over the course of something like 25 seconds. So the first one would have been about 8 seconds long, and then they got progressively shorter, so maybe 1 second shorter each time, which over the course of 11 filled out about 25 seconds. The effect is absolutely brilliant, and again, that's typical of many of the things I've noticed in this score in general, just that representation, or what I perceive to be, the musical representation of what I perceive to be what physics were involved. Again, we're talking about a situation where most musicians are not professional physicists or even amateur physicists, of any recognisable level. But we know obviously as much as the next person in terms of general principles. And so that imagination that you attach between musical expression or visual expression and science is something that is just part of the mystery of art sometimes also. But conversely, very often scientists are very appreciative of what art has to offer in terms of expressing the laws of the universe, whatever they might be.
Well, I have to trepidatiously mention his name, but I read a book which probably many people have read, called The God Delusion by Professor Richard Dawkins. And he said he doesn't believe in any God or anything like that.
He's a pure atheist, isn't he?
He's a very ardent atheist, but he once said, but it doesn't mean I don't like listening to Haydn's Creation or Mozart Piano Concerto, but God seems to have all the best tunes. And I thought at that point, but that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. Why not write music which shows the awe and wonder of the universe without any belief in God or anything? So it was kind of off the cuff remark maybe, but I felt, yeah, he's right. It's very easy in a way to make great music in adoration of religious subjects, but where are the pieces which are in adoration of the glory of creation and the glory of whatever? But there's one thing I wanted to say quickly before we move to the next one, is I have an apology on this Boethi's Empty Quarter piece, because actually this one very important element of a lot of the music I write these days is electroacoustic music. And this comes to the fore in the Boethi's Empty Quarter. It's very empty with these weird ghostly sounds in the void. And you hadn't heard any of that when you actually did the recording, so it was like you went in a bit dry, whereas the Virgo, you knew what it was going to sound like.
Yes.
But you didn't know what it was going to sound. So you couldn't quite.
But I sensed that in the Boethi's, the second part of this, the Boethi's, the Empty Quarter, I certainly sensed the vastness of what was presumably a big empty void.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was certainly something which,
So apologies for that, but I think it still works.
It absolutely works, and I think this video, number 4, I think we regard it as sort of one of the highlights and perhaps the centerpiece of the 9.
It is.
It's not exactly in the middle,
the center of,
but it feels like the center of gravity, as it were, of some notable clusters. A very powerful piece of music.